I'm Sophia, 31, born into Boston's most beloved bakery family. Since I could reach the countertops, I was groomed to inherit Sweet Heritage Bakery. My entire identity was wrapped in flour and family tradition until that voicemail changed everything. One business proposal, one calm understood from my lips, and suddenly I was erased from the family legacy. What they intended as punishment became my unexpected liberation. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're from, and hit that subscribe button before I show you how that devastating message transformed into my greatest blessing. Sweet Heritage wasn't just a bakery, it was the centerpiece of my existence. My grandparents, Elizabeth and Joseph, started with a tiny storefront in 1965, bringing old-world recipes from their European homeland. Their signature sourdough and cinnamon rolls quickly became neighborhood legends. Growing up, the bakery was more my home than our actual house. The warm, yeasty aroma permanently lingered in my clothes, my hair, and my memories. By age 7, I was perched on a step stool, learning to knead dough beside my grandmother. Her hands, weathered and flour-dusted, guided mine with gentle patience. Baking is love made tangible, she'd say in her soft voice. You must respect the ingredients, respect the process. Those early lessons shaped not just my baking skills, but my understanding of dedication and craftsmanship. My father Robert took over when I was 10, expanding from one location to 3 by the time I reached high school. He was a shrewd businessman with uncompromising standards. Where my grandparents baked with joy and intuition, my father brought precision and systems. Under his leadership, Sweet Heritage became an institution, the place where Bostonians celebrated special occasions and everyday victories alike. At 14, I officially joined the payroll, starting with weekend shifts cleaning display cases and packaging orders. My father insisted I learn every position in the business. You can't lead what you don't understand, he'd lecture while assigning me to mop floors or take inventory. Unlike other teenagers who resented family obligations, I embraced each task as preparation for my destiny. My mother, Evelyn, managed the financial side of things. Quiet but observant, she maintained the books with meticulous attention. While my father commanded attention in the front of house, my mother ensured everything behind the scenes ran smoothly. Together they were a formidable team, their partnership extending seamlessly from marriage to business. My brother Nathan, 2 years younger, always approached the bakery with calculated interest rather than passion. He'd do what was required but lacked the fire that burned in me. Still, he was favored by our father for his unquestioning adherence to tradition. Nathan never suggested changes or improvements, which our father interpreted as respect rather than complacency. After high school, my path was predetermined but welcome. I attended Johnson and Wales University, majoring in baking and pastry arts before completing a business degree at Boston University. Every holiday and summer break found me back at Sweet Heritage, applying new techniques while respecting our classic offerings. I experimented after hours, creating contemporary versions of our traditional pastries. Some of these experiments became weekend specials, small concessions my father allowed to my creative phase. By 25, I returned full-time to Sweet Heritage as production manager. The title was impressive but limiting. My father scrutinized every decision, from ingredient suppliers to staff scheduling. Despite my education and training, I remained Robert's daughter in the eyes of longtime employees. I earned respect through consistent work and innovative problem-solving, gradually assuming more responsibility over our 3 locations. The business was successful by conventional standards, profitable and respected. Yet I could see warning signs my family ignored. Foot traffic had plateaued. Younger customers visited for special occasions, but didn't become regulars. New bakeries with modern aesthetics and plant-based options were opening throughout Boston, capturing the market segments we weren't serving. For months, I researched industry trends, analyzed our financials, and developed a comprehensive proposal for Sweet Heritage's evolution. I created detailed projections, mock-ups for rebranded packaging, and sample menus that honored our classics while introducing contemporary options. My proposal wasn't about abandoning our heritage, but ensuring its relevance for generations to come. The night before my presentation, I stayed late perfecting my slides and rehearsing my pitch. The bakery was silent except for the occasional hum of refrigerators. Standing in the space my grandparents had built, I felt their entrepreneurial spirit urging me forward. They hadn't succeeded by clinging to the past, but by meeting their community's needs with excellence. I was certain my plan honored their legacy more truly than stubborn stagnation ever could. As dawn broke, I finalized my notes with trembling fingers. This presentation wasn't just about business strategy. It was my audition for leadership, my vision for our family's future. I couldn't have known that by sunset, that future would no longer include me. The quarterly family business meeting was scheduled for a Monday afternoon when the bakeries were closed. We gathered in the back office of our flagship location, the space feeling smaller than usual, with tension filling the air. My father sat at the head of the conference table, his reading glasses perched on his nose and a legal pad positioned perfectly in front of him. My mother took her usual seat to his right, a spreadsheet of monthly figures already open on her tablet. Nathan lounged across from her, scrolling through his phone with practiced disinterest. I connected my laptop to the projector with steady hands that belied my racing heart. The familiar scent of sourdough starter from the nearby kitchen usually calmed me, but today it only intensified my awareness of what was at stake. This bakery wasn't just a business. It was our family's identity, our legacy, our future. And I was about to suggest transforming it. I've prepared a comprehensive growth strategy. I began, clicking to my first slide titled Sweet Heritage, Honoring Tradition Through Innovation. Our bakery has been successful for 3 generations because our grandparents and you, Dad and Mom, understood the importance of quality and community connection. My proposal builds on those values while addressing current market challenges. My father's expression remained impassive, but I noticed his jaw tighten, never a good sign. My mother smiled encouragingly while Nathan's eyebrows raised slightly, his attention suddenly captured. The presentation I'd worked on for months unfolded slide by slide. I outlined how our sales had flatlined over the past 2 years despite Boston's growing population and increased consumer spending on premium food items. Our customer demographic was aging, with declining engagement from younger consumers who prioritized different values in their food choices. My proposal has 4 main components, I explained, advancing to a quadrant slide. First, a digital transformation including online ordering and delivery partnerships. Second, menu evolution that maintains our classics while introducing seasonal and dietary-conscious options. Third, a physical refresh of our spaces to create more inviting environments for both traditional and contemporary customers. Finally, a satellite location strategy, focusing on smaller footprints in high-traffic areas. The silence following my introduction was weighted with disapproval. My father removed his glasses slowly, a gesture I recognized from countless employee reprimands. "You want to turn Sweet Heritage into some trendy coffee shop?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Online ordering? Gluten-free options? These aren't improvements, Sophia. They're distractions from what we do best." "I'm not suggesting abandoning anything we do well," I countered, advancing to my financial projections. These additions would supplement our core offerings while attracting new customers. Look at these numbers, an estimated 30% revenue increase within 18 months, with proportionately smaller overhead increases. My mother studied the figures with genuine interest, but my father barely glanced at them. Nathan's expression had transformed to something between amusement and contempt. "Sweet Heritage succeeds because we don't chase trends," my father interrupted. "Your grandmother never needed a website to sell bread. Your grandfather didn't worry about Instagram-worthy decorations. They built this business on consistency and quality." "Times have changed, Dad," I persisted, my voice steady despite the knot forming in my stomach. Grandma and Grandpa were innovators in their day. They introduced products no one else in Boston was making. They weren't afraid of evolution. "Don't lecture me about my own parents," he snapped, color rising in his face. 30 years running this business successfully, and Suddenly, you think you know better after reading some industry magazines? I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this reaction was expected. Change is threatening, especially to someone who's built their identity around a particular vision of success. I advanced to customer survey results I'd quietly conducted over 3 months. These aren't just my opinions, I explained. These are direct insights from current and potential customers. 78% of respondents under 40 would visit more frequently if we offered online ordering. 65% would pay premium prices for limited edition seasonal items. Nathan finally spoke, his tone dismissive. Surveys can say whatever you want them to. People claim they'll pay more for fancy options, but when it comes time to open their wallets, they stick with what they know. I've accounted for that in the projections, I responded, trying not to sound offensive. Even with conservative conversion estimates, the return on investment is substantial. My mother, always the mediator, attempted intervention. Sophia has clearly put significant thought into this. Perhaps we could implement some smaller changes as a test. Absolutely not, my father interrupted, standing suddenly. This conversation is over. Sweet heritage isn't broken, and I won't let you fix what doesn't need fixing. The finality in his voice should have deterred me, but I'd anticipated resistance. I'd prepared for it. What I hadn't prepared for was the personal attack that followed. This is exactly why I'm concerned about the succession plan, he continued, looking at me with disappointment that cut deeper than anger ever could. You've always had these grandiose ideas without understanding what makes this business work. It's not about trends or technology. It's about tradition, reliability, and staying true to who we are. Dad, this plan is about preserving who we are by ensuring we remain relevant, I countered, my voice rising despite my best intentions. Every successful family business evolves with each generation. I'm not suggesting we abandon our heritage. I'm trying to secure it. The argument escalated, with my father dismissing each point without truly considering it. My mother attempted occasional peacekeeping but lacked the conviction to truly oppose my father. Nathan watched the exchange with poorly concealed satisfaction, occasionally offering comments that only inflamed the situation. After 40 minutes of circular arguments and increasing hostility, I realized this meeting was never going to be a good faith discussion. My father had decided before I'd spoken a single word. The presentation, my research, the projections, none of it mattered because his mind was closed to the possibility that change might be necessary. This conversation is finished, my father declared finally. Sweet Heritage will continue operating exactly as it has been. If you can't accept that, Sophia, perhaps you should reconsider your role here. The implied threat hung in the air between us. Years of preparation, education, and dedication reduced to an ultimatum: conform or leave. I could feel 3 pairs of eyes on me, waiting for my response, waiting to see if I would apologize, backtrack, surrender. I closed my laptop slowly, disconnected it from the projector, and gathered my materials with deliberate calm. When I finally spoke, my voice was quiet but firm. Understood. That single word, neutral, professional, ambiguous, was all I offered before walking out of the office.
No Dramatic Exit, no Tear Full Play, no Angry Rebuttal.
Just understood, acknowledging I'd heard him without conceding he was right. As I drove home to my apartment across town, emotions churned beneath my composed exterior.
Disappointment, certainly.
Frustration, absolutely. But beneath those expected reactions stirred something unexpected: relief. For the first time, I'd stood my ground professionally without compromising my vision to maintain family harmony. That evening, as I poured a glass of wine and tried to process the day's events, my phone lit up with a voicemail notification. My father rarely called my personal phone, preferring to address work matters in person. I hesitated before pressing play, unprepared for how those recorded words would permanently alter my path. The phone felt unusually heavy in my hand as I stared at the voicemail notification. 6 minutes and 23 seconds, unusually long for my typically terse father. I set my wine glass down, took a deep breath, and pressed play, switching to speaker mode as my father's voice filled my silent apartment. Sophia, this is your father. His formal introduction, as if I wouldn't recognize the voice that had guided and criticized me throughout my life. After today's meeting, your mother, Nathan, and I had a lengthy discussion about the future of Sweet Heritage. Your presentation made it abundantly clear that your vision for the business fundamentally conflicts with the principles this family has built over 3 generations. I sank onto my couch, sensing what was coming but unable to prepare myself for the actual words. We've made the difficult but necessary decision to remove you from your position at Sweet Heritage, effective immediately. Your security codes will be deactivated tonight, and HR will prepare your final paycheck. Nathan will be assuming the role of operations director next month after completing the management training program. My breath caught in my throat. Nathan, who had shown minimal interest in the bakery's operations, who had half my experience and none of my formal training, was replacing me. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. My brother was being rewarded for his lack of vision, while I was being punished for mine. Your attempt to dismantle our legacy with these fancy ideas demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of what Sweet Heritage represents. This isn't just about business strategies, Sophia. This is about respect for tradition and family values. Your grandmother would be deeply disappointed by your willingness to abandon everything she built for some trendy concepts you picked up in business school. The invocation of my grandmother, who had always encouraged my creativity in the kitchen, felt like a deliberate twist of a knife. She had been gone 5 years, conveniently unable to contradict my father's assertion. As your father, I'm disappointed. As your employer, I'm terminating your position. You'll always be our daughter, but Sweet Heritage needs leadership that honors its past rather than trying to reinvent it. Your mother is upset, but she agrees this is necessary. Nathan understands the responsibility he's being given and appreciates the importance of continuity. The message continued with clinical details about returning company property and a clipped mention that we would discuss this further at Sunday dinner. His voice never wavered, never softened. This wasn't an emotional decision for him. It was business, plain and simple. I hope someday you'll understand why this had to happen. Your response of just understood showed exactly the kind of dismissive attitude that concerns me. This family business requires full commitment to its values, not reluctant compliance. The message ended without a goodbye, just a click followed by the automated voice asking if I wanted to save or delete the message. I replayed it immediately, then again, and again, as if repetition might somehow transform the words into something less devastating. My apartment suddenly felt alien. The space I'd decorated with such care over 3 years now seemed to belong to a different Sophia, one whose identity wasn't unraveling in real time. The exposed brick walls I'd once found charming now felt cold and industrial. The carefully curated bookshelf of culinary references and business texts mocked me with their supposed wisdom. What good was all that knowledge if my own family couldn't see its value? I paced the length of my small living room, phone still clutched in my hand. Tears threatened but didn't fall. I was too shocked, too numb for crying. 31 years of my life had been spent preparing for a future that had just evaporated in a 6-minute voicemail. The buzzing of my doorbell interrupted my spiraling thoughts. Through the intercom, I heard my best friend Amanda's voice. Sophia? I brought dinner and wine. Let me in. I buzzed her up automatically, grateful for the interruption despite having no appetite. Amanda had been my roommate in culinary school, now a successful pastry chef at one of Boston's most innovative restaurants. She knew my family dynamics intimately, having witnessed countless disappointing Sunday dinners and frustrating work situations over our decade of friendship. I brought that butternut squash gnocchi like from Polino's, she announced, sweeping in with takeout bags and an extra bottle of wine. Her smile faltered as she saw my face. What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. I wordlessly handed her my phone, the voicemail still queued up. Her expression transformed as she listened, moving from confusion to disbelief to outrage. By the message's end, her hands were shaking nearly as much as mine. That absolute, she caught herself, setting the phone down carefully as if it might explode. Sophia, I'm so sorry. This is completely unjustified. Is it? My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Maybe I did push too hard, too fast. Maybe. Stop right there, Amanda interrupted, gripping my shoulders. Your ideas were solid, forward-thinking, and completely reasonable. Any other bakery would be thrilled to have someone with your vision leading them into the future. She moved to the kitchen, unpacking containers while continuing her indignant commentary. The familiar ritual of setting out plates and opening wine provided a momentary distraction from the catastrophe unfolding in my professional life. The worst part, I said, accepting the glass she handed me, is that they're giving my position to Nathan. Nathan, who takes 3-hour lunches and couldn't tell you the difference between proofing and fermentation if his life depended on it. Of course they are, Amanda sighed. He's the safe choice because he'll never challenge your father's authority. This isn't about capability, it's about control. We settled on my couch, food temporarily forgotten as I replayed the message again. Listen to how he twisted my understood against me. As if responding professionally instead of throwing a tantrum was somehow proof I'm not committed. Amanda listened carefully to that section. You know what's ironic? That understood was probably the most mature response possible in that situation. You didn't argue, didn't burn bridges, didn't say anything you'd regret. And he's using that against you. My entire identity has been sweet heritage, I whispered, the reality finally sinking in. What am I supposed to do now? Amanda set down her wine glass with unexpected force. Are you serious? Sophia, you're a classically trained pastry chef with a business degree and years of operational experience. You're not just Robert's daughter. You're a talented professional who could work anywhere. Who would hire me after being fired from my family business? First, you weren't fired. You were strategically removed because you threatened the status quo. Second, any forward-thinking bakery or restaurant would snap you up in a heartbeat. She paused, studying my face. But I don't think that's what you really want, is it? The question hung between us as I considered it honestly. Working for another establishment would feel like admitting defeat, like abandoning the path I'd been walking my entire life. What I wanted was to lead Sweet Heritage into the future, I admitted. But that future doesn't exist anymore. Amanda leaned forward, her expression suddenly intense. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Sophia, I've watched you compromise your vision for years to accommodate your father's resistance to change. What if this is actually an opportunity? An opportunity to be unemployed and disowned? Great, sign me up. An opportunity to create something that's truly yours, she corrected. Something that embodies all those ideas your family rejected. Something that proves your vision was right all along. The suggestion was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. Start my own bakery? Compete with the family business? The very thought felt like betrayal. And yet, I wouldn't even know where to begin, I said, though my mind was already racing with possibilities. Amanda smiled, recognizing the spark of interest beneath my hesitation. Lucky for you, I happen to know someone who specializes in helping culinary professionals start their own businesses. My friend Julia consulted for Chef Martin when he opened his place last year. She's brilliant. As we finally turned to our now cold dinner, the conversation shifted from commiseration to cautious possibility. By the time Amanda left near midnight, the devastation of the voicemail had transformed into something different. Not hope exactly, but perhaps its prerequisite. Defiance. Alone again, I saved the voicemail instead of deleting it. Someday, I thought I might be grateful for its brutal clarity. My father had intended those words to put me in my place, to bring me back to the fold chastened and compliant. Instead, they were becoming the catalyst for a journey I'd never considered possible. I fell asleep that night with understood echoing in my mind, no longer a simple acknowledgement, but a declaration. I understood exactly what was happening. I understood my worth beyond Sweet Heritage. And soon, everyone else would understand it too. The week following the voicemail became a blur of emotional extremes. Tuesday morning, I woke to 17 missed calls, 5 from my mother, 3 from Nathan, and the rest from concerned employees who'd heard rumors about my sudden departure. I returned none of them, unable to trust my voice or my composure. By Wednesday, the numbness had worn off, replaced by waves of anger, grief, and paralyzing anxiety. I alternated between frantic cleaning of my apartment, 3 a.m., found me organizing my spice rack alphabetically, and periods of complete inertia, staring at my ceiling as if it might offer some direction. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by dreams where I was locked outside the bakery, pounding on windows while my family continued working inside, pretending not to see me. Thursday brought my first panic attack in years, heart racing, unable to catch my breath while grocery shopping. The sight of Sweet Heritage's signature sourdough on a store shelf triggered a cascade of memories. My grandmother teaching me to feed the starter, my first successful loaf at age 12, the certificate my father had framed when I mastered all 73 bread varieties in our rotation. A kind stranger helped me to a bench while the episode passed, mistaking my distress for a medical emergency rather than an identity crisis. Friday morning, my mother called from a number I didn't recognize, presumably to bypass my screening. Her voice was gentle but firm, reminding me that regardless of workplace disagreements, I was expected at Sunday dinner as usual. Family is family, she insisted, as if the distinction between personal and professional relationships was clear-cut rather than hopelessly entangled. The familiar ritual of Sunday dinner at my parents' suburban home had never felt more excruciating. I arrived exactly on time, neither early enough to suggest eagerness nor late enough to appear disrespectful. The practiced smile on my face felt like a mask stretched too tight. My mother greeted me with a kiss that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We've missed you at the bakery," she said, as if I'd been on vacation rather than forcibly removed. My father offered a stiff nod from his position at the grill, turning chicken with mechanical precision. The backyard, with its carefully maintained garden and patio furniture arranged just so, embodied the controlled perfection my family valued above all else. Nathan appeared with his girlfriend Patricia, his arm draped casually around her shoulders. The gold watch on his wrist, our grandfather's vintage Omega traditionally passed to the business successor, gleamed in the afternoon sun. The significance wasn't subtle. He'd never worn it before. "Sophia," he acknowledged with exaggerated cordiality. "How's unemployment treating you? Getting plenty of sleep, I imagine." Patricia, oblivious to the tension, chatted about their recent weekend in the Berkshires, a trip Nathan had apparently taken despite the critical training period my father had mentioned in the voicemail. The contradiction wasn't lost on me, but I maintained my composure, sipping lemonade and offering appropriate responses when directly addressed. Dinner conversation carefully skirted any mention of Sweet Heritage until dessert, when my father cleared his throat. Nathan presented some interesting inventory control measures at yesterday's management meeting. Should reduce waste by nearly 12%. My mother nodded enthusiastically. Such a practical approach. Simple but effective. The inventory system they were praising was one I'd implemented 6 months earlier after researching industry best practices. Nathan had opposed it then, calling it unnecessarily complex. Now he was taking credit while my contributions were being systematically erased. "I'm sure Nathan will make an excellent operations director," I said, my voice steady despite the bitter taste in my mouth. "He's always been skilled at following established protocols." The double-edged compliment hung in the air. Nathan's eyes narrowed slightly before he smiled. "Some of us understand the value of tradition, sis. Not everything needs reinvention." I excused myself shortly after, claiming a headache. My mother walked me to the door, her expression conflicted. "Give it time, Sophia. Your father will cool down eventually. Maybe in a few months, we can discuss a different position for you." The well-intentioned suggestion only deepened my wound. After years of preparation, after being promised leadership, I was now expected to be grateful for some lesser role. A consolation prize for the daughter who dared to think independently. "I appreciate your concern, Mom," I replied, embracing her briefly. "But I think it's best if I explore other opportunities for now." Her face registered genuine surprise, as if the possibility of my life continuing outside Sweet Heritage had never occurred to her. Perhaps it hadn't. Monday morning, I woke with unexpected clarity. The spiral of self-doubt had run its course, leaving behind a strange calm. Amanda's suggestion of meeting her business consultant friend suddenly seemed not just possible, but necessary. Julia Reed operated her consulting business from a converted industrial space in Somerville. The loft-like office featured exposed beams, polished concrete floors, and walls covered with framed restaurant menus, food magazine covers, and press clippings about her clients' successes. "So you're the talented baker Amanda won't stop talking about," she said, forgoing a handshake for a warm hug. With her silver-streaked bob and vibrant scarf, Julia projected creative professionalism rather than corporate stiffness. "She says you make a lavender honey cake that changed her life." The casual compliment loosened something in my chest. Here was someone who knew me first for my craft rather than my family connection. "I've been in this business 20 years, Julia continued, gesturing for me to sit at a round table scattered with notebooks and samples of packaging design. "I've seen every type of culinary venture succeed and fail. The ones that make it have three things: distinctive product, clear vision, and a founder with both passion and persistence. From what Amanda tells me, you've got all four in spades." For the next 2 hours, Julia asked questions that no one in my family had ever bothered to ask. What aspects of baking brought me the most joy? Which innovations excited me? What did I believe modern customers were missing in their bakery experiences? As I answered, she took meticulous notes, occasionally interrupting with clarifying questions or insightful observations. "Here's what I'm hearing," she said finally, turning her notebook toward me. She'd sketched a rough concept for a bakery that combined traditional techniques with contemporary presentation and flavors, exactly what I'd tried to propose for Sweet Heritage, but without the constraints of existing expectations. "This could work," she said, her confidence contagious. "Not just work, thrive. Boston has plenty of traditional bakeries, including your family's. It has plenty of style over substance Instagram bakeries, too. What it doesn't have is something that bridges that gap with substance and innovation. That's your sweet spot." For the first time since the voicemail, I felt a flicker of genuine excitement. "Even if you're right, I need capital, equipment, location, all manageable challenges," Julia interrupted. "What's your financial situation? Any savings? Assets? Potential investors?" I hesitated, calculating mentally. "I have about 40,000 in savings. My grandmother left me a small inheritance when she passed, another 30,000 that I've never touched. I always thought of it as emergency money. If being fired from your family business and needing to build a new career isn't an emergency, I don't know what is," Julia remarked dryly. 70,000 is a solid start, but we'd need more. Small business loans are an option. Angel investors, potentially. Crowdfunding even." She pulled out a blank sheet of paper. "Let's draft a basic business plan right now. Working name for this concept." The question caught me off guard. I hadn't allowed myself to think that far ahead, to imagine actually naming this hypothetical venture. And then, without conscious deliberation, words formed in my mind. "Rise and Flourish Bakery." Julia smiled, writing it at the top of the page. Perfect. Both a baking reference and a statement of intent. Now let's figure out how to make Rise and Flourish a reality. By the end of our session, we had outlined initial steps, researching locations, developing a distinctive menu that showcased my particular talents, creating preliminary financial projections, and identifying potential funding sources. Julia introduced me to a commercial real estate agent specializing in food businesses and recommended an attorney experienced with restaurant startups. "This won't be easy," she warned as I prepared to leave. "Family dynamics aside, any new food business is a challenge. But I've helped launch over 60 restaurants and bakeries, and I can tell you have what it takes." Walking to my car, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The path ahead was uncertain, terrifying even, but it was a path, direction rather than the aimless drifting I'd experienced since the voicemail. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "How did it go with Julia?" I responded simply, I'm starting my own bakery. The reads appeared immediately, followed by, finally, when do we start testing recipes? The enthusiasm in those simple words buoyed me through the afternoon as I drove to the bank to discuss loan options. The loan officer, a woman named Melissa, reviewed my financial history with professional interest. Your credit is excellent, she noted, and your industry experience is impressive. Using your inheritance as collateral helps considerably. I think we can approve a business loan of $100,000 contingent on a solid business plan and proof of additional personal investment. Combined with my savings, this would give me enough to secure a modest location, purchase essential equipment, and cover initial operating costs. It wasn't the budget I would have had at Sweet Heritage, but it was my beginning. That evening, I sat at my kitchen counter with a notepad, listing recipes that could form the core of Rise and Flourish's offerings. Traditional techniques with contemporary twists. Heritage grains with unexpected flavor combinations. Classic pastries reimagined for modern palates. With each item I wrote, my confidence grew. These weren't just recipes, they were my declaration of independence. My phone rang again, my father this time. I silenced it without hesitation. Whatever he wanted to say could wait. For now, I had a business to build and a point to prove. The spiral of grief was giving way to something more productive: determination. 6 months passed in a whirlwind of activity, each day bringing new challenges and unexpected victories. After viewing 17 potential locations, I finally found the perfect space in South End, a former bookstore with good foot traffic, high ceilings, and character. The rent stretched my budget, but Julia insisted location would be crucial to my success. This neighborhood has exactly your target demographic, she explained during our walkthrough. Young professionals and families who appreciate quality and are willing to pay for it. Plus, you're far enough from Sweet Heritage locations to minimize direct competition while still being in a Boston neighborhood that knows good bread. The lease signing felt momentous. My name alone on a commercial contract, no family cosigners or corporate guarantees. Just Sophia Matthews, entrepreneur, taking her first tangible step toward independence. Renovations quickly consumed my savings and tested my patience. The contractor discovered plumbing issues that required extensive updates. The vintage tile floor I'd hoped to preserve proved unsalvageable. The custom display cases I'd designed arrived with incorrect dimensions, requiring costly modifications. Each setback taught me something my years at Sweet Heritage hadn't: how to make executive decisions without family consensus, how to negotiate with vendors who didn't know or care about my lineage, how to problem-solve with limited resources. These lessons came at a price, both financial and emotional, but they were forming me into something new, a business owner rather than an heir. Developing Rise and Flourish's menu became my refuge during construction chaos. Amanda offered her restaurant's kitchen during off hours, creating a laboratory for experimentation. We worked nights, testing and refining recipes that would define my new brand. My sourdough base remained similar to Sweet Heritage's. Some techniques were simply correct, regardless of tradition versus innovation debates. But my variations departed dramatically: turmeric black pepper loaves, orange rosemary focaccia, chocolate sourdough with cherries. Each recipe balanced technical excellence with creative flavor combinations. Pastries followed the same philosophy. Classic croissants shared space with versions laminated with miso butter or filled with unexpected ingredients like roasted strawberry and black sesame. Traditional cookies received subtle updates with brown butter, spice blends from global cuisines, or alternative sweeteners that added complexity. These are incredible, Amanda declared, sampling a cardamom rose morning bun. Familiar enough for traditionalists, but interesting enough for food adventurers. It's exactly what you described to your family, but they were too stubborn to see it. Creating my brand identity became another creative outlet. Working with a graphic designer friend of Julia's, I developed a visual language that balanced heritage and modernity, clean typography paired with hand-drawn botanical elements, a color palette of deep blues and warm terracottas. The logo featured stylized wheat stalks forming an ampersand between rise and flourish. With the physical space taking shape and menu development progressing, I began assembling a small team. The first hire was Maria, a culinary school graduate with boundless enthusiasm. Then came Luis, an experienced baker seeking a more creative environment than his previous corporate position. Danny joined as front-of-house manager, bringing retail experience and infectious positivity. During interviews, I found myself articulating my vision more clearly than I ever had at Sweet Heritage. We're building something that honors traditional techniques while embracing contemporary tastes, I explained to each potential team member. Quality is non-negotiable, creativity is encouraged, and customer experience is paramount. The team responded to this vision with genuine excitement. Unlike the longtime employees at Sweet Heritage who viewed innovation with suspicion, my new staff embraced the blend of tradition and progress. They contributed ideas, suggested improvements, and invested emotionally in Rise and Flourish's success. Technology implementation, the very thing my father had rejected, proceeded smoothly. We installed a modern point-of-sale system with integrated online ordering capabilities. Our website featured our story, detailed product descriptions, and convenient pre-ordering options. Social media accounts showcased behind-the-scenes preparation and highlighted our commitment to both craft and innovation. As opening day approached, financial stress intensified. Construction delays had eaten into my operating capital. Equipment costs exceeded estimates. Initial inventory required significant investment before any revenue would materialize. Each night, I revised spreadsheets, adjusting projections and seeking areas to economize without compromising quality. 2 weeks before our scheduled opening, disaster struck. The custom oven I'd invested in, a cornerstone of our operation, malfunctioned during testing, requiring replacement parts from Europe with a 3-week lead time. Without proper baking capacity, opening would be impossible. Panic threatened to overwhelm me as I called an emergency meeting with Julia and my team. We have 2 options, I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. Delay opening until the oven is repaired, losing momentum and burning through cash reserves, or find an alternative solution immediately. Maria spoke up first. My cousin works at Metropolitan Bakery. They're renovating and have 2 older deck ovens they're replacing. They're not as efficient as our new one, but they're workhorses. Maybe they'd sell or rent them to us as a stopgap. Within hours, I was inspecting the used ovens, solid, industrial models that lacked the programmable features of my custom unit, but would handle our production needs. The owner, hearing my situation, offered a reasonable price and immediate availability. By midnight, we were installing them in our kitchen, reworking our production flow to accommodate their different configuration. This crisis, like each before it, built my confidence. At Sweet Heritage, such a setback would have required committee discussions, parental approval, and probably weeks of deliberation. Here, I identified the problem, evaluated options, and implemented a solution within a single day. The experience was simultaneously terrifying and empowering. The final week before opening passed in a blur of 18-hour days. We conducted staff training, finalized procedures, calibrated equipment, and completed countless small tasks that would define our customer experience. I barely slept, existing on adrenaline and the increasingly tangible reality of my vision. The night before our grand opening, I stayed after everyone left, sitting alone in the dimly lit space. The cases were empty, awaiting tomorrow's products. The tables were perfectly arranged, their walnut surfaces gleaming. The menu boards displayed our offerings in hand-lettered detail. Everything was ready. I thought about my family, who remained completely unaware of what I'd been building. I hadn't attended Sunday dinners in months, offering vague excuses about personal projects when my mother inquired about my activities. Nathan had texted occasionally, his messages alternating between half-hearted reconciliation attempts and thinly veiled gloating about his new position. Part of me had wanted to tell them, to invite them to the opening, to seek some form of validation or approval. But a stronger part recognized that this journey wasn't about them anymore. Rise and Flourish wasn't created to spite sweet heritage or to prove my family wrong, though it might accomplish both. It was about creating something that truly represented my vision, unfettered by someone else's limitations. As I locked up that final night, I touched the sign above our door. Rise and Flourish Bakery, EST 2023, and whispered to myself, understood. The word had evolved from passive acknowledgement to personal mantra, a reminder that sometimes the best response to rejection is creation rather than argumentation. Tomorrow would bring the true test. Would customers respond to my vision the way I believed they would? Would the months of planning, the financial risk, the emotional investment prove worthwhile? These questions followed me home, but for the first time since that fateful voicemail, I faced uncertainty with confidence rather than fear. Whatever happened next, I had already succeeded in the most important way. I had found my own voice. Our grand opening exceeded every expectation. Despite minimal advertising, just some local food blog coverage and social media buzz, a line formed 30 minutes before our doors officially opened. By 9 a.m., we had sold out of morning pastries and were rushing to bake additional batches. By closing time, our cases were empty and our team exhausted but exhilarated. This is insane, Maria laughed as she counted the register. We did almost triple our projected first-day sales. The success wasn't just financial. Throughout the day, customers had responded enthusiastically to our offerings, many purchasing multiple items to try. Several specifically mentioned our concept of tradition reimagined, echoing the very philosophy my family had rejected. Each positive comment felt like vindication. Leah Burke, an influential local food blogger, arrived mid-morning and spent nearly 2 hours sampling, photographing, and interviewing me for her widely read blog, Boston Bites. Her enthusiasm was obvious, but I tried to temper my expectations about her review. 3 days later, her article appeared with the headline, Rise and Flourish, How One Baker is Revolutionizing Boston's Bread Scene. The glowing review praised our masterful technique applied to imaginative flavor profiles and declared our cardamom rose buns possibly the best pastry in Boston right now. She specifically highlighted our commitment to balancing tradition and innovation. The blog post went unexpectedly viral, shared by several national food accounts and picked up by Boston Magazine's online edition. Suddenly, our modest social media following multiplied. Local news stations requested interviews. The line outside each morning grew longer, despite increased production. For 3 exhilarating months, we operated at capacity, continuously adapting to meet demand without compromising quality. I hired 2 additional bakers and another counterperson. We extended hours and expanded our menu cautiously, ensuring each new offering maintained our standards. The loan that had seemed so daunting was being repaid ahead of schedule, and profitability, unusual for a new food business, appeared on the horizon. Through it all, I maintained radio silence with my family. My mother left increasingly concerned voicemails about my extended absence from Sunday dinners. Nathan texted occasionally, with thinly veiled inquiries about my employment status. My father remained conspicuously silent. I knew they would eventually discover Rise and Flourish. Boston's food community was too interconnected for them to remain oblivious forever. Still, I wasn't prepared for the Tuesday afternoon when I emerged from the kitchen to find all 3 of them standing in my bakery, surveying the space with expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed anger. My father, impeccable in his usual button-down and pressed slacks, stood rigidly by the entrance. My mother, clutching her purse with white knuckles, offered a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Nathan, arms crossed defensively, scanned the crowded tables and busy counter with naked disbelief. For a moment, I froze, the confident business owner instantly reduced to an insecure daughter. Then Danny called from the register. Sophia, can you approve this special order? The sound of my name, spoken with respect and professional deference, snapped me back to the present reality. This was my space, my creation, my success. I approached my family with practiced composure, wiping flour from my hands onto my apron. This is unexpected, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Welcome to Rise and Flourish." "So, this is what you've been doing," my father stated flatly, his tone making it sound like I'd been engaged in something shameful rather than building a thriving business. "Creating a knockoff of our family bakery." The accusation stung despite its predictability. "This is hardly a knockoff, Dad. Rise and Flourish has its own distinct identity and offerings. Using techniques and recipes you learned at Sweet Heritage," he countered, voice rising slightly. Several customers glanced our way, sensing the tension. "Perhaps we could continue this conversation somewhere more private," my mother suggested, always conscious of appearances. I led them to our small office at the back of the bakery, hyper-aware of how they scrutinized every detail of the operation along the way. Nathan lingered at the display case, studying our offerings with narrowed eyes. Once the door closed behind us, my father didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You're using our family recipes. That's intellectual property theft, Sophia." The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. "I'm not using a single Sweet Heritage recipe. Every item here was developed specifically for Rise and Flourish." "That sourdough has our signature crust pattern," Nathan interjected. "And those morning buns are clearly based on Grandma's cinnamon roll technique. Basic bread scoring patterns aren't proprietary," I explained with forced patience. "And yes, I use traditional lamination techniques because they're the correct way to create layered pastry. That's like accusing someone of stealing because they bake cookies at 350 degrees. My mother, always the mediator, attempted to defuse the escalating tension. "Your place is lovely, Sophia. We just wish you had told us about your plans." Finding out from customers who kept mentioning this amazing new bakery was surprising. "Would you have been supportive if I had told you?" I asked directly. Her telling silence confirmed what I already knew. My father filled the awkward pause. "We've lost 12% of our usual business since you opened. Customers who've been coming to Sweet Heritage for decades are suddenly trying your experiments." He made innovation sound like a character flaw. "You've deliberately positioned yourself to poach our clientele." "I'm 3 miles from your nearest location," I countered. "I developed a completely different concept specifically to avoid direct competition. If customers are choosing Rise and Flourish, perhaps that suggests there's demand for what I'm offering." Nathan scoffed. "What you're offering is novelty. People will get tired of cardamom whatever and come back to quality basics." "Our reviews suggest otherwise," I replied, unable to keep a note of pride from my voice. "And our repeat customer rate is nearly 80%. My father's expression darkened. "This is exactly why we couldn't trust the business to you, Sophia. No respect for tradition. No loyalty to family. You took what you learned from us and used it against us at the first opportunity." The unfairness of this accusation ignited something in me. Not the defensive hurt I might have felt months ago, but a calm certainty about my choices. I presented a detailed plan to evolve Sweet Heritage responsibly, I reminded him. "You rejected it without genuine consideration. You removed me from the business I'd spent my life preparing to lead. You promoted Nathan despite his limited experience and interest." I turned to my brother. "No offense, Nathan." He shrugged, uncomfortable with the direct confrontation. "And then," I continued, facing my father, "you left me a voicemail, not even the courtesy of a face-to-face conversation, informing me that my career was over because I dared to suggest improvements." "We gave you every opportunity," he began. "You gave me every opportunity to be exactly what you wanted," I interrupted, surprising myself with my calmness. "But not to be who I am or to contribute what I actually have to offer." I gestured toward the bakery beyond our office door. "This isn't about competing with Sweet Heritage. It's about creating something that represents my vision of what a bakery can be. If I'd wanted to hurt the family business, I could have opened a traditional bakery next door to your flagship location or gone to the press about being forced out. Instead, I built something different that stands on its own merits." My mother's expression softened slightly, a flicker of understanding crossing her face. My father remained stone-faced, but Nathan shifted uncomfortably, his certainty visibly wavering as he processed my words. Your grandmother would be disappointed, my father said finally, invoking his ultimate authority. The comment would have devastated me months ago. Now, I smiled slightly. Actually, I found Grandma's recipe journals when I was cleaning out my apartment storage last month. Did you know she experimented constantly? There are dozens of variations on her traditional recipes, notes about ingredients we would consider revolutionary today. She was an innovator who adapted to changing tastes while maintaining quality. That's exactly what I proposed for Sweet Heritage, and exactly what I've created here. For the first time in our conversation, my father seemed genuinely thrown. My grandmother's legacy was the foundation of his business philosophy. The suggestion that she might have approved of my approach undermined his entire position. Before he could formulate a response, there was a knock at the office door. Luis poked his head in apologetically. Sorry to interrupt, Sophia, but Boston Magazine is here for that interview and photo shoot we scheduled. The timing couldn't have been more perfect if I'd orchestrated it. My father's expression tightened further at this evidence of Rise and Flourish's growing prominence. I'll be right there, I assured Luis before turning back to my family. I need to get back to work. You're welcome to stay, sample our offerings, see what we've built here. Or not. But I want to be clear about something. I took a deep breath, meeting each of their gazes directly. When you left that voicemail telling me I was out of the family business and I only said understood, it wasn't passive acceptance. I understood exactly what you were doing. I understood that you weren't capable of seeing beyond your own limitations. And I understood that the only way forward was to create something new rather than trying to fix something that didn't want to be fixed. My father's face reddened, but for once, he seemed at a loss for words. My mother glanced between us, conflict evident in her expression. Your business is lovely, Sophia, she said finally. Perhaps not what we would have done, but impressive in its own way. It wasn't wholehearted approval, but it was the first acknowledgement of my achievement, however qualified. For my mother, that represented significant movement. Nathan uncrossed his arms, his hostility partially dissolved. The cardamom rose things do smell amazing, he admitted reluctantly. They taste even better, I replied, opening the office door. You should try one before you leave. My father remained silent as they exited, his worldview visibly shaken. Whether their visit would lead to reconciliation remained uncertain, but something fundamental had shifted. They had seen my success with their own eyes, witnessed the customer enthusiasm, recognized that my vision had merit. More importantly, I had faced them not as a rejected daughter seeking approval, but as a successful business owner secure in her choices. As the office door closed behind them, I didn't immediately follow. I needed a moment to process the confrontation, to acknowledge both the lingering pain and the newfound strength. My hands trembled slightly with residual adrenaline, but my mind was clear. Whatever happened next with my family, rapprochement or continued estrangement, would happen on different terms than before. The power dynamic had fundamentally changed. Taking a deep breath, I emerged from the office to find Luis waiting anxiously. Everything okay? He asked, concern evident in his expression. I smiled, genuine and uncomplicated. Everything is exactly as it should be. Now, let's talk to Boston Magazine about what makes Rise and Flourish special. 1 year after that confrontational family visit, I stood in the center of Rise and Flourish's third location, supervising final preparations for its grand opening. The Brookline space represented our largest investment yet, a corner property with expansive windows, custom fixtures, and a demonstration kitchen visible to customers. Like our South End original and Cambridge satellite, this location embodied our philosophy of transparency, quality, and thoughtful innovation. The pastry case alignment is still slightly off, I noted to the installation team. Can we adjust it about half an inch to the left? Such attention to detail might seem excessive, but I'd learned that success resides in these small considerations. Each Rise and Flourish location maintained consistent standards while incorporating unique elements reflecting its neighborhood. Our brand had become synonymous with excellence in Boston's competitive food landscape, recognized for both technical mastery and creative vision. The journey to this moment had been neither straightforward nor painless. Financial challenges nearly derailed our expansion when a key investor pulled out unexpectedly. Staffing 3 locations required developing management systems beyond my initial expertise. Maintaining quality across multiple kitchens demanded standardized procedures without stifling the creativity that differentiated us. Yet each obstacle had ultimately strengthened both the business and my leadership. The financial setback led to a crowdfunding campaign that generated capital and created a community of invested supporters. Staffing challenges prompted a management training program that developed internal talent. Quality control issues inspired a robust testing and feedback system that improved our offerings across all locations. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Good luck with the new location opening. Your father and I might stop by later this week." This simple message represented hard-won progress in our family dynamics. The reconciliation process had begun tentatively about 3 months after their confrontational visit, initiated by my mother's solo appearance at our South End location one quiet afternoon. "I've been thinking about what you said," she admitted over coffee and a slice of our signature olive oil cake. "About your grandmother being an innovator. I found her old recipe books in the attic, and you were right. There are notes and variations everywhere. Things I never knew she tried." That conversation marked the beginning of a careful rapprochement. My mother began visiting regularly, first alone and later occasionally accompanied by my father. Their interests seemed genuine, if sometimes uncomfortable. My father particularly struggled to witness my success without measuring it against Sweet Heritage's traditions. Nathan's evolution surprised me most. After initially maintaining distance, he reached out with unexpected humility. "Running operations is harder than I thought," he confessed during an awkward lunch 6 months into his role. "I'm starting to understand why you pushed for some of those changes." His visit to Rise and Flourish followed, revealing genuine curiosity about our systems and approaches. "Your online ordering setup is impressive," he acknowledged. "Our customers keep asking why we don't have something similar." These interactions never explicitly addressed the voicemail or my dismissal from Sweet Heritage. My family approached reconciliation obliquely, focusing on present circumstances rather than past injuries. I accepted this indirect approach, recognizing that acknowledgement of success constituted its own form of apology from people constitutionally incapable of admitting error. Sweet Heritage, meanwhile, faced growing challenges. Their customer base continued aging, their market share gradually eroding despite Boston's expanding population. Industry publications that featured Rise and Flourish's innovation rarely mentioned the established chain. Online reviews increasingly described Sweet Heritage as old-fashioned or traditional, terms that had once been compliments but now carried undertones of stagnation. These developments brought me no satisfaction. Despite everything, I didn't want my family's business to fail. Their struggles confirmed my original analysis, but provided no vindication, only the hollow knowledge that the changes I'd proposed might have prevented their current difficulties. Ironically, Sweet Heritage began implementing modest versions of my rejected proposals. Their website improved. Limited online ordering appeared. Their menu incorporated cautious seasonal variations. Nathan never explicitly credited these changes to my influence, but the timing suggested my success had prompted reconsideration of modernization. As I finalized preparations for our Brookline opening, Julia arrived with a celebratory bouquet. "From concept to 3 locations in 18 months, she marveled, surveying the space. "You've defied every startup statistic in the restaurant industry." "We've been fortunate," I acknowledged, arranging her flowers at the front counter.
Fortunate, yes.
"But also brilliant, determined, and clear-visioned," she corrected. "Don't diminish what you've accomplished, Sophia. Hundreds of food businesses open every year. Most fail. You've succeeded because you balance tradition and innovation in exactly the right proportions." Her words echoed in my mind as I welcomed our first Brookline customers the following morning. The lines stretched around the block despite light rain, people patiently waiting to experience what Rise and Flourish offered. Among the crowd, I spotted familiar faces from our other locations, loyal customers who had followed our journey from the beginning. That afternoon, while supervising the kitchen during a brief lull, I received an unexpected call from my father. Our phone conversations remained infrequent and typically initiated by my mother, making his direct contact notable. "Your brother showed me the article in Food and Wine," he said without preamble. "The one calling Rise and Flourish, the future of artisanal baking, and you a visionary preserving traditional techniques through modern interpretation." I waited, unsure where this conversation was heading. "It's a good article," he continued, his voice unusually hesitant. "Accurate from what I've seen of your operations." Coming from my father, this constituted effusive praise. I murmured thanks, still waiting for his purpose to become clear. "Sweet Heritage's Beacon Hill lease is up for renewal next month," he said finally. "We're considering changes to the concept. Nathan we thought perhaps you might be willing to consult. Provide some perspective." The request represented a seismic shift in our relationship. My father wasn't merely acknowledging my success, but actively seeking my input. The business that had rejected my ideas was now soliciting them. "I'd be happy to share thoughts," I replied carefully, "though I'm quite busy with our expansion." "Of course," he agreed quickly. "Perhaps Sunday dinner? Your mother misses you." The invitation carried layered significance: reintegration into family tradition, acknowledgement of my expertise, tentative restoration of personal connection. I accepted with similar carefulness, setting boundaries around what consultation might entail while opening the door to renewed engagement. That evening, after our successful first day in Brookline, I walked alone through the South End location where everything had started. The space was empty now, chairs upturned on tables, equipment cleaned and ready for morning. In the quiet, I reflected on the journey from that devastating voicemail to this moment of professional triumph and personal reconciliation. The painful ejection from Sweet Heritage had forced me to create something authentically mine rather than adapting someone else's vision. The limitation had become liberation. The rejection had become opportunity. The wound had become strength. Most importantly, I had discovered my own definition of success, one based not on inheritance or approval but on authentic expression of my values and vision. Rise and Flourish wasn't successful because it proved my family wrong. It was successful because it represented something genuine and necessary, meeting a need others hadn't recognized or addressed. My simple, understood response to my father's voicemail had contained multitudes. It acknowledged his decision without accepting his judgment. It closed one door, while preserving my dignity to open another. It represented the pivot point between who I had been raised to be and who I chose to become. As I turned off the lights and locked the door behind me, I realized that the most profound lesson wasn't about business strategy or family dynamics. It was about the power of authentic response to rejection. When faced with dismissal of my worth and vision, I could have argued, pleaded, or surrendered. Instead, I simply understood and then created something undeniable. The journey wasn't over. Family relationships would require ongoing navigation. Business success would demand continued innovation and adaptation. Personal growth would present new challenges and opportunities. But whatever came next, I would face it with the confidence of someone who had transformed rejection into creation and limitation into possibility. Some would call my story one of revenge or vindication. I prefer to see it as a testament to resilience, the capacity to absorb painful truth and use it as foundation rather than obstacle. My family's voicemail declaring me out of the business hadn't ended my story. It had simply prompted me to write a different and ultimately more satisfying chapter. Have you ever faced rejection that eventually led to something better? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more tales of unexpected resilience. And remember, sometimes the most powerful response to "you can't" is simply understood, followed by proving just how wrong they were. Thank you for joining me today, and may you all rise and flourish in your own unique ways.